this webinar on GetSuite on GSuite. I'm Dr. Christy Goddard, and I'm here with Dr. Lori Schieffer.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lori Schieffer. Welcome to the webinar.
And we are focused today on helping you to develop career readiness in teachers, preparing teachers to be teachers. Today our focus is not only on career readiness, but how to help you connect with your teacher candidates, include choice in your classroom, and really collaborate to do the best job we can for our future students.
And all with a focus on using GSuite and other technology. Let's jump in to learn a little bit more about your presenters.
Hi, I'm Christy Goddard from Grow Your Teaching. I've been a teacher for more than 20 years. I started my career at the elementary level and shifted to the high school in the latter part. I'm currently a professor of education and I am Google certified. I love integrating technology into my learning. I hope you enjoy and benefit from the upcoming webinar.
I'm Dr. Lori Schieffer from CEUs for Teachers. I have served as a teacher and principal for over 20 years. I've worked in all levels of K-12 and now higher education. I've been a professor of education for over 10 years, working with pre-service teachers, principals, and educators striving to improve their practices. Basically, I'm an education junkie who loves helping other teachers. I'm passionate about using technology to foster virtual collaboration, so enjoy the webinar.
To get started, we'd like to model the importance of finding out what your students know, aka formative assessment. So we'd like you to take this Pretest Survey, which is indeed a Google form. When you click on the QR code, in the description below, you will find a link to the Google Pretest Survey or GetSuite on GSuite pre-assessment. Now don't worry, there's no right or wrong answers. We just want to find out a little bit about what you know. So jump in and take a moment to do the pre-assessment. It won't take you longer than a minute or two to answer the responses, and we appreciate it. Our first big idea is that of career readiness. As higher education instructors, or even K-12, we know it's imperative to prepare our students for the real-world application of their career. This starts with a direct bridge from the theory they're learning in the classroom to a transfer of their actual skills with their students. Preparing students for their career sounds easy and seems intuitive, but we really need to have a shift in how we focus our teaching so that our students are really able to apply what they've learned. How many of you have had those theory type classes that really focus on best practices, but you really don't have a chance to see how they play out in the classroom? In this webinar, we're going to cover some specific ways to actually bridge that theory into practice. What do you think career readiness means in your classroom, Christy?
In my higher education classrooms, I focus a lot on application. We read the theories, we discuss them, and we work through them. But in the end, the products I need from my students are applicable to their classroom settings, even if they haven't started their career as a teacher yet, or they've been teaching for 40 years. I need to know that the content that has been explained, covered, discussed is able to be used by them in the classroom. Teaching is one of the professions where application is almost the highest level. We can go back and look at evaluating and synthesizing and bringing it all together in those really higher level order thinking skills at the end, but if you can't apply it, we can't get to that level. What I like to do in my classroom is move it from a student-centered classroom to a teacher-centered classroom. By this, I mean that in traditional colleges or higher education settings, students are all about being still students. They're learning different content, but they're still the main focus. In higher education, in teacher education particularly, we need to shift that focus from them being students to them being teachers. We need to focus less on static technologies and more on dynamic ones that they can apply in their own classrooms and use on a regular basis. We need to recognize that teachers in today's schools are communicating with parents, with administrators, and with students on a daily basis, not to turn in an assignment on how to construct an email. We also need to focus on not just telling them what needs to happen in their classroom, but showing, demonstrating, and actually having them demonstrate back to us that they understand this. Again, that application is the focus. Finally, we spend a lot of time in education talking about higher order thinking skills and how to cover them and how to make connections with them. But we don't spend time talking about how to develop them within the students who will become the teachers. Lori, how does student-centered versus teacher-centered apply to your situation?
That's a great question, because as you were talking, I was thinking about, you mentioned that we need to really have students applying it. So once we're teaching them the components of, for example, higher order thinking, they need practice to actually put that into their own assignments, especially when we're looking at technology. In order to prepare my students to be teachers, I really want to focus on assignments that are centered around their future career. One of the ways I do this is I ask my teachers to create a blog for their future students. One of the topics they can choose from is bully prevention. This is an authentic assignment that allows me to assess their knowledge, but also gives them an actual product they can use in their future classrooms as teachers. So the shift here is from the student being a student to actually preparing to be a teacher. The assignments are applicable, usable, and something that they can continue to modify over time so that when they first step in that classroom, they actually have something to use. I'll never forget my first teaching experience. I was assigned to teach in a 6th grade classroom, social studies and language arts. My introduction was walking in to my classroom and the principal saying, "Here are your materials and textbooks." I sat down, opened up the textbook, and started to write my lesson plan. I had absolutely no idea of how to use the textbook. I wished that my program would have helped me prepare materials so that when I walked in that classroom, I was actually ready to teach. So any example of an assignment that students can use as a teacher, I think just gives them a head start. So a blog is just one example. Another example I like my students to do is to create a newsletter or poster to share on back to school night. In this newsletter or poster, they can create all of the basic information that not only will teachers need, but students as well. So anytime you can shift so that your students are preparing to be teachers and use those materials, I think it makes a great connection and a win-win for all of us.
I agree, Lori. That's something that's so important and something that we need to more focus on. I think that we got bogged down in the shift to technology to the idea of digital natives versus digital immigrants. And obviously, you and I would probably have been considered digital immigrants. I can remember back to my very first computer when I was in elementary school and how the most exciting thing in the world was to get your name to scroll across the screen. That was pretty much all we could do. Now, look at us. We're building webinars. We're working in online environments. We've really come a long way. The natives, those students that have had a device in their hands since birth, there was always the talk of this great divide between them, and that it was the job of higher education and schools and tools to bridge this divide so that we would understand how, as immigrants, these new natives, so to speak, learned. But recently, I came across a new phrase, digital wisdom. And the idea of digital wisdom is that we need to prepare our teachers how to use technology in a wise manner, not just to bridge this divide or to build a relationship, but really to enhance the capabilities of what the students can do, what they can learn, and why it is so important. And this shift is really where the career readiness comes into play.
I think this is an important point because I take for advantage that my students know how to use technology because it's so pervasive in our society. But really, having that wisdom, I think, is the key word because it's more than just using technology or using a tool. It's about how to use it wisely and how to use it to prepare for the career of educating our youth. With this continued focus on career, I think it's important that we talk about the differences in how we're using technology with intention.
So often as higher education professors, we are helping students to develop the strategies to get their work done. In other words, we're helping them reinforce strategies they will use as students to get the work done, to get the grade, to graduate from the higher education institute. Unfortunately, in career readiness, what we need them to be practicing, what we need them to be learning are strategies how to do the job, how to be a teacher. And these are often very different strategies. Things that you might use as a student would look very different than things that you would use as a teacher. So right now, we want you to take just a few minutes and collaborate and think about what strategies do you use when you're studying to get the work done for a class? And what strategies do you need to learn to do the job of teaching?
You should now be seeing a link to click on the collaborative activity. When you click on the link, you'll be redirected to this Google document. What we're asking you to do is join in the collaborative fun by adding strategies to get work done versus the strategies to learn to do the work. I like to think of this as sort of that old-fashioned making students memorize something versus asking them to actually apply. And that's kind of what we're looking at here is that shift. So let's look at an example of strategies to get the work done. And because this is a collaborative document, I actually have Christy typing as we're looking at it. So one of the examples she's going to add that a strategy she uses is to play music while she's getting her work done. So she's going to go ahead and add that to the slide. And this is exactly how you'll add yours too. And then across from that, she's going to make that shift and look at a strategy that will actually help her learn to do the work, which is to recognize that in diverse classrooms, some students will be annoyed with listening to music while studying. So you can kind of see the shift there that a strategy to get work done would be playing music, but when we shift to the concept of learning to do the work, we've got to take it to the next level and recognize how to put it into place. So add your ideas and review what others have written so that we can make this a collaborative document, both to take a look at the strategies, but also to see how collaboration works and how you might use this same concept to help shift your students to being teachers.
So why is it important to understand that as a teacher candidate, you need to not just know how to get the assignment done for the classroom, you also need to know how to use that information in the classroom. And why are we so focused on GSuite? Well, what you need to understand is that more than 50 million teachers and students in classrooms across the world use GSuite products to effectively teach, learn, and communicate. When you have an audience of 50 million people, you have to consider how that can be used in the classroom. And that career readiness, if your higher education professionals are not introducing, considering, describing the GSuite products, then you are not preparing those students to service those 50 million people. And that's a big part of the population to leave out.
And what I hear you say is it's really not optional anymore. Technology, or using Google, for example, it's not optional, and it's not an add-on, and it's not a filler. But what we're really talking about is the direct integration so that our students, who are those future teachers, are really prepared how to use these tools in their careers.
Exactly, Lori. So if we look at what Google has to offer, Google offers for education the Google Apps for Education suite, and you can see that that involves Classroom, Gmail, Google Drive, Calendar, Docs, Sheets, Slides, and Sites. These apps are free for nonprofit K-12 education organizations, and these are the apps that those 50 million people are using on a regular basis. The nice thing for us in higher education is that Google links with almost any LMS, learning management system, to allow you to develop connections between you, your students, and that real world application that career readiness demands.
One example that I like to use in my classrooms are forms that I can integrate directly into an announcement or into a discussion board so that other students can see the ideas shared and the information gathered. It's also a great way to do formative assessment by offering a pretest. The calendar feature I also use in one of my classrooms for my open office hours, so students are able to make an appointment with me right through my calendar and see my office hours. There's so many applications that I can't even begin to describe how to use them. But the important part is that each one is usable in any learning management system platform, whether it be Blackboard, Canvas, a proprietary learning system. Anything you use, you're going to easily integrate your Google tools into your classroom. These tools help you stay connected.
So, as Lori already talked about, Google Forms allow you to take actionable data, whether this be through a survey, a quiz, or some other scheduling. Perhaps you need to schedule appointments with your students. While you could use a calendar, you could use a form to gather data as to what date range would be the best that most students would be available. So it really gives you actionable data. In today's teaching world, actionable data is something that students need on a regular basis. Email is the primary form of communication. It is the way people in all jobs, all aspects are communicating. And Google Gmail allows you to set up filters and communicate and provide instant feedback. But not just through email does Google allow you to communicate. You can provide real-time feedback on assignments. You can collaborate and work together on a Google Doc or a Google slideshow, just as Lori and I have been doing in this presentation. I can provide feedback to her through the comments section. and she can make changes, or we can have a dialogue. These collaborative opportunities and communication opportunities really allow for more work to be done in a shorter period of time, something that all teachers, whether you're at the kindergarten level or at the postdoctoral level, we all seem to need more time.
As we talked about earlier, when you're going through these, something that came to my mind, Christy, was that we talked earlier that they're not optional, and they really aren't, because just recently in one of the schools I was principal at, my teachers would use the GSuite for daily tasks, not add-ons, not optional fun activities, but daily integration into their classroom. And when you talked about communication and collaboration, I just want to jump in here and say that, teachers are using this, integrating it seamlessly. They're using it for peer activities, so asking students to work together using the Google Suite, using the GSuite tools. They're asking students to prepare presentations that are collaborative. They're creating lesson plans in professional learning communities with each other. So these aren't add-ons. They're not fun little activities. These are actual necessary components that are happening in, as you stated earlier, 50 million people are using. So I want to just really focus on the fact that all of these great ideas you're sharing are not just pipe dreams. These are real applications taking place in the classroom. So now I'll let you finish where you were going with the collaborative opportunities.
You're exactly right, Lori. It is a big task completion setting. Google Classroom by itself allows for teachers to assign assignments, for the work to be collected, for it to be distributed individually. The nice thing is it allows for differentiation too, and that personalization. I can give you an example. A teacher colleague of mine had surgery, and she teaches in a pretty narrow focus. She teaches Latin. As you can imagine, there aren't a lot of subs out there who understand and can teach Latin in a qualified manner. The surgery wasn't optional. She couldn't wait until the summer to have it done, but she needed her students to keep moving forward with their Latin instruction. By using the Google tools, she was able to create daily screencasts, lessons that were audio, video, webinar, so to speak, type activities to provide the core instruction. Then she was able to use Google Docs to provide feedback to students from her hospital bed, if she so choose, or from when she got home or other situations. She was able to still continue to collaborate and provide information. The students didn't lose out on education, and she felt like she was still servicing them in an appropriate manner. This ability to differentiate, personalize, complete tasks is the crux of the Google platform, and it's something that as a teacher we can't afford not to use.
Well, and as you talk about all of these, I could just hear some people saying, well, this is all great, but I just teach on higher education, or I just teach online, and I don't have access to Google Classroom, or I don't really understand how to do this. And that's something we want to make sure we provide some examples so that our viewers out there and our participants specifically have ideas you can walk away with. Because just as we talked earlier about bridging the gap, we want to make sure that you can actually use these too. So we want you to feel comfortable. I want to provide just a few quick examples of how we're using technology, and not just the GSuite, but other tools as well in our classrooms to make that shift for career readiness and to focus our students on being teachers. Some of the ways we'd like to share those examples include adding most universities have some sort of conceptual framework or mission statement. So I've taken that and placed it into a Tagcedo, and I'll provide the links later of some of these different tools that you can use as well. But just a simple, fun way that can also be turned into an assignment for your students to be able to create their own document or their own infograph of information. On the right side, you'll see that welcome to class. This is a poster I use that is an infograph that's free, and I'll share that with you as well. But basically, all of these directly correlate from using technology, helping our teacher candidates to communicate, personalize their classroom, and make authentic materials to use when they step into their first class. In addition, these can be personalized. Christy talked about that in the last slide. A welcome video is a simple way, and you can use the Google tools. You can use the slides and a screen capture. There's a lot of free tools out there, and you can create a welcome video to personalize your introduction to your classroom, as well as model how students can use it for a guest teacher, as Christy mentioned earlier, when you know you're going to be out of the classroom. There's so many different applications. Rubrics. I know that Christy uses the Google tools to create rubrics. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, Christy?
So I have just used a Google form, and it created my rubric with checkboxes so that I have, the statements that we use in higher education all of the time. You use the same statements over and over, especially if you've taught a course multiple times. And then the point values are at the top. And I have the student list at the top. I click the student's name, fill out the rubric based on their assignment, and then it's collected in a sheet. The sheet then merges into a Google Doc, which I can then return to the students, where they get their feedback on the assignment. By having those statements that I use over and over again in higher education, I'm saving myself precious minutes grading time to connect more and to interact more with my students, as opposed to the solitary activity of grading work that they've turned in. In addition, it provides them with personalized feedback and more in-depth feedback, because I can constantly add or change the rubric as things pop up. I'm not having to spend time recreating the wheel. And I've found it to be a very effective, not only time-saving tool, but students really appreciate the amount of feedback that I'm able to give, because I'm able to save some time. And I always leave an open-ended box on my rubrics where I can provide targeted, personalized feedback to each student.
And not only is that it's such a great example, but you're also modeling for our future teacher candidates how they can be prepared to use technology and rubrics, all of these best practices in one in their classroom. So not only are you walking the talk, but you're reinforcing these best practices. As you are talking, you just have all these ideas that are running through my brain of how we can use these to connect. For example, if you and I taught the same course, we could collaborate. This is a great opportunity. We could collaborate using that rubric together using the Google tools. And as I'm thinking how we can connect, all of these ideas are running through my brain, and I hope all of our participants out there are also getting lots of ideas, which is why we'd like to make a virtual collaboration experience. Please click on the collaborative link below in the description box. It will take you to a Google slide where we can all connect and share our ideas. When you open that, you're going to see this slide where you can add your ideas of how to connect with your students using the GSuite or any other technology tools. So one example is that we can use a formative assessment type of survey to find out what our students know. In addition, wouldn't it be fun to have a Google slideshow where we allowed our class to add their introduction? So we could have a collage of pictures from our students. Think about that traditional welcome, please post your biography. While that gives us a connection and some information, I could just see such potential in having an actual biography slideshow where we could add pictures of our family, type ideas, and actually interact right on the slide with other students and create just a dynamic poster. I mean, this makes me think of a direct transition into the classroom where oftentimes teachers will make bulletin boards, for example, of their class at the beginning of the year to prepare for back to school night. It would be that same concept, but we're taking it to a virtual level using technology. Does that sound like something you've ever tried or would try, Christy?
Yeah, I honestly haven't tried the biography things, but I have had, I teach a class on behavior management for severely disabled students. And we have done collaborative projects like this before where they've used slides to create and comment and produce a tool that can be used as a communication device to help students communicate when they're frustrated. And the products have been amazing, that when you put two brains together in a connected format as opposed to one brain by themselves, the quality and the depth of thinking is just amazing.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a very powerful and dynamic assignment. And again, I can see so many different applications, and I hope that our participants will jump in and start adding their ideas as well. And if this slide becomes too busy, we can add other slides as well, really simply because it is a collaborative document. If you have the link, you have access and you can jump in and make those changes. So very powerful way to add ideas. I also think while it's not the focus of our presentation, it really builds camaraderie. It builds relationships in the classroom, which we're always striving for, of course, in an online or even face-to-face classroom.
This is a final example I wanted to share that is a calendar example of how to use the GSuite calendar tools. So in this example, all of my faculty were expected to teach certain behavior expectations every Tuesday and Wednesday during homeroom. And in order to expedite lesson planning, I would use the Google Calendar. So here we see an example, dress code expectations. And then when faculty linked to that in their calendar, there'd be a attachment that would have the actual Google Drive lesson plan attached. So for this example of dress code, they would just simply click on it and up would come the dress code expectations, and then each teacher had the lesson plan right there in front of them as they taught that expectation for behavior to their homeroom class. So not only did it help ensure that everybody had fidelity to teaching the expectations, but also ensured that the teachers were easily able to grab that lesson plan and teach it without a lot of preparation time. So that's just one example. You can see that the calendar I've chosen here is very full. 6th grade teaming, for example, this once opened is a link and actually has the agenda of what would be followed during that team meeting. So this helped facilitate communication. For example, if I was unable to attend that meeting, I could still go in and read the notes, or I could decide if I needed to be present based on what the team was planning to discuss on their agenda. So just a few examples of how to use the GSuite calendar to communicate and how it's actually being used in a real world example in the classrooms.
So the key in higher education, again, the focus on career readiness, is that we need to present students with authentic problem-solving activities. And as a higher education professor, as a teacher of kindergarten, 7th grade, 9th grade, you understand that not all of our students learn the same way. And our teacher candidates need to understand that not all of their students will learn the same way. So while the activities and assignments need to be authentic and provide authentic problem solving, there also needs to be that choice, that ability for them to respond and demonstrate their mastery in different ways. We've highlighted some of these before. We've talked about the blog, we've talked about the word clouds, we've talked about infographics. You're pretty familiar with YouTube videos and presentations, I would hope. So there's lots of different ways that responses can be given. The key is that regardless of how many different response methods you offer, that the work be authentic and that it allow for a work-like assignment. So, for example, a traditional classroom management class asks you to develop your philosophy on classroom management. That's the goal. And you might see an assignment like write a paper on blah, 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 your philosophy. It doesn't take much to change this into a work-like authentic assignment. Instead of just write a paper on your classroom management style, you want to give a scenario as to why a teacher would have to do this. What makes it work-like? What makes it authentic? So an example that I provided is, it's back to school and your administrator has asked you to share your personal philosophy on classroom management with your parents and students. So I've given the scenario, a realistic thing. I've been in many schools where principals or administrators or parents, this is a regular part of the back to school packet night. But if you notice, instead of a paper, I've given them multiple opportunities or choice in how to do it. For example, if I wrote a 700-word paper explaining my philosophy on classroom management, I could hand it out at back to school night, and I bet you 3 out of every 10 parents would actually take the time to read it. They are not going to want to read a 700-word paper, so that may not be the best method of communication with parents. And I can tell you right now that at my high school setting, it would be less than 3 out of 10 students that would sit there and read an entire 700-word page paper presenting my philosophy on classroom management. So those aren't necessarily real work-like experience methods of presentation. While the paper might be easy for me to grade as a professor, it certainly isn't a realistic work-like assignment. So maybe they want to write the paper, and maybe that's fine. But maybe they want to create a video, or a slide, or a prezi, or an infographic, or a poster, or have an introductory part of their syllabus. Those are just some ideas. By changing the assignment and making it work-like, not only have I made it that authentic, but I've also given them choices in how to respond that will work for them within their actual classroom environment. Therefore, what they take from my class isn't a 700-word paper on their philosophy of classroom management that goes in a drawer that they never use again, but is an authentic document that they can use that first day of school when faced with those staring, lovely eyes looking at them, wanting information. Lori, what's another example you might have?
All right. Well, what a great example, because again, it's all about using it, bridging that gap from theory to actual practice. Almost every university I teach for, well, in fact, all the universities I teach for use a discussion starter or some sort of first message to generate conversation among students. You might refer to it as participation, discussion questions, discussion blogs, whatever you call it. Almost every application has some sort of discussion required. Now, in a traditional classroom, this might look like something on the left. Write at least 100 words to the following discussion question. And then we ask students something like, what is your philosophy of education? Well, to transfer this to become a more work-like assignment, we might have 3 different options, such as create a poster to share at back to school night, or write a letter to parents, or record a summary of your philosophy so that you can use the actual technology tools. All of these are much more applicable and relevant to what our students will actually be doing in the classroom. And as you can tell, throughout our entire webinar, we've really focused on hands-on what's going to happen in the classroom so that we're preparing our teachers for what to expect when they walk in that first day. So no matter what our students' proclivities are for completing an assignment, they get this choice. What would they rather do? Would they rather create a poster, write a letter, or do a recording? So we're giving them options and choice, but yet there's always that direct correlation back to a work-like assignment. In addition, you might provide an example, which I've done in the past as well, that gives students a chance to collaborate, which brings us to the idea of Boyer's model. Another way I have created work-like examples is to collaborate with my peers at the university level. Collaboration is a great way to get started when you're not sure how to integrate technology or these career readiness ideas into your classroom.
To integrate, you want to consider that you're not just exchanging information. You want to be able to give discipline-specific approaches. For example, if you are secondary level teachers who will be teaching at a middle or a high school level where they may be asked to be discipline-specific, it's a way to help them share resources and to integrate information from multiple sources together to achieve the common goal of educating students. So as you consider integrating technology in your classroom in a collaborative manner, you want to consider that the collaboration doesn't just need to be an exchange of information. It can be cross-disciplinary, especially if you're working with secondary teachers who are in different content areas, to help them build a unit, for example, on integrating each of their content areas into one unit so that they can reinforce each other's learning. This helps to make it more authentic. But that ability to collaborate, particularly if you're in an online environment where students sometimes feel isolated or alone, the collaboration can be key to success.
We also have a lot of tools that we can use to exchange information, share resources, and integrate across disciplines. One of the methods I like to use is Twitter hashtags. And this can be as simple as using a hashtag with your name or your class identification in a discussion post or an announcement to drive your students to Twitter to engage with each other and with other past or even present students who might take your course. Hashtags can also be used in Google Educator groups.
Google Educator groups are a way for educators across the world to connect and share information and support each other implementing the GSuite products to ensure success. And these go beyond the basic products that we've talked about, but Google Expeditions, Google Cardboard, all of those great innovative tools are things that can be accessed through Google Educator groups.
Wow, those are some exciting tools to use, and I can't wait to learn more about those. One of the other common collaborative tools that we hear often is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn has the ability to find others who share your passion or your collaborative ideas so that you can work together. So for example, if you teach childhood development, you can use LinkedIn to find groups that would share those same interest areas. Google Hangouts is something we're actually using right now. So tell us a little bit about how teachers or students can use Google Hangouts in the classroom.
K-12 are to connect with people that you can't bring to your classroom. Let's say you're doing an author study in your classroom and you've read several books by a particular author. Some authors allow you to connect with them via a service such as Google Hangouts to have a real-life chat with an author, something you might not be able to do due to finances or other situations in your classroom. You can also create a screencast using Google Hangouts on Air to share information with your students or connect with them. But Lori, you had a really great idea on how a Google Hangout could be integrated into a teacher education class. Do you want to share it now?
Yeah, so as we were actually brainstorming, which is one of the things I love about collaboration, is it gives me ideas that I might not think about otherwise, is to use a Google Hangout to practice a parent-teacher conference night. So imagine giving your students a sort of case study that they could use and take the role. You'd have two students. One would take the role as the teacher, and the other would take the role as the parent, and they could actually practice a parent-teacher night conference. And how powerful is that? Because boy, do I remember my first parent-teacher conference and feeling absolutely scared to death to have those conversations. So just a great way to practice that. They could record it even for an assignment. So when we touch back to those work-like assignments, using a Google Hangout to record a parent-teacher conference simulation would be an awesome work-like experience. Another one would be to practice interviewing for your future career as a teacher. So for our students to jump in there, and even if you had time, or if not, with another student, they could record a Google Hangout where they practiced interviewing so that they had that career readiness and that transition. And again, that work-like assignment. If you didn't have time to hang out with every student, which I'm sure you wouldn't, you could also record, as Christy mentioned, your presentation and just ask students questions, giving them time to pause so that they could use that simulation to practice their own interview with you, even though you weren't really live. So those are just a few ideas, and we have talked about so many great ideas that I've even got to think about, wow, some ways I can make some modifications in my own classroom. So because we've given so many ideas and we have these Google Slides where hopefully our audience is jumping in there and sharing their ideas too, let's try to narrow this down. So Christy, what takeaway, what is your big idea that you would want our participants to leave with today?
Well, Lori, our focus has been on career readiness, and that really is the biggest takeaway, that higher education has a duty to prepare teachers to be teachers, that we need to shift our focus away from treating them as students and treat them as the professionals they're going to be. It's essential that we not only provide those authentic problem-solving activities, but that we connect with our students, integrate choice, and teach them to be collaborative, because after all, teaching is one of the most collaborative professions in the world.
We would be remiss if we didn't ask you to do a post-test survey so that you can compare what you've learned now to your pretest in the very beginning. This also helps us know how effective we were during the presentation. Please click on the link below to be taken to the post-survey Google form. We are so honored that you took the time to spend with us over the last hour or so in this webinar.
We just want to take a minute and leave you with our contact information should you need any additional support.
In case you want to reach out, collaborate, connect, or learn more ways to add choice and career readiness into your classroom. I'm Dr. Lori Schieffer.
And I'm Dr. Christina Goddard.
Look forward to our future collaboration. Happy teaching.
Grow Your Teaching, tips, tools, and professional development for teachers by teachers. You can follow us at growyourteaching.com, tweet at Dr. Goddard, or email at growyourteaching@gmail.com.
This is Lori from CEUs for Teachers, where your continuing education units are simple, convenient, and affordable. Please visit my site at ceusforteachers.com, where you can find more about my Substitute Teacher Academy. Send me an email at lori@ceusforteachers.com. Let's collaborate.